Thanksgiving was always uncomfortable in our house, but that year it broke something in me. My name is Claire Evans. I'm 34 now, and for most of my life I've tried to be small, the one who made things easier, quieter, smoother. I never demanded attention. I just showed up, did what needed to be done, and stayed out of the way. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe when you spend your life being the glue, people stop noticing you're holding everything together. My brother Brandon, he was always the favorite, the achiever, the charming one, the one my mother introduced with pride and a beaming smile. Me, I was just Claire. No spotlight, no special treatment. But that Thanksgiving, after mashing potatoes for 3 hours and setting the table alone, my mother looked me in the eye and said 6 words I'll never forget. You're just a burden. Always have been. I showed up early as always. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and sugar glaze, and my mother was already barking instructions without even looking at me. "No hug," I asked, forcing a smile. She didn't answer, just pointed toward a bowl of unmashed potatoes. "These need mashing." I nodded and got to work. Sleeves rolled up, pretending it didn't sting. It did, but I'd gotten good at pretending. Brandon arrived an hour later, carrying a bottle of Pinot and a woman half his age named Madison. She looked like she'd stepped out of a perfume ad, all long legs and high-pitched laughs. Mom rushed over like royalty had entered the palace. "My boy," she said, kissing both his cheeks. "And who's this beautiful creature?" I stayed in the background, setting the table, moving silently between rooms like a ghost no one had invited. "When I placed the napkins," Madison squealed. "Oh, everything's so perfect." Mom beamed. Claire's always been practical. It wasn't a compliment. Dinner was a parade of Brandon's wins. His latest corporate pitch, his trip to Barcelona, the condo in downtown Chicago. Mom's eyes sparkled with every word. Madison giggled like she was paid to. I cut my turkey into small, quiet pieces and stayed quiet until Mom turned to me. "It must be nice living alone, huh?" she said, her tone light but sharp. "No responsibilities." I gave a soft laugh, trying to stay light. "Yeah, well, the mortgage fairy sure helps with that." She blinked. Then came the ice. "You know, Claire, you act like you're doing us some huge favor. You're not. You're just a burden. Always have been." The room froze. Brandon chuckled. "At least I make this family proud." That's when I stopped chewing. I set my fork down slowly, deliberately. I looked at my hands. Hands that had scrubbed their bathroom tiles, repaired their leaky sink, paid their mortgage more times than they could count. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't even look at them. I just stood up, walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove. I don't remember the drive home. I just remember the silence. No music, no tears, just the weight of a sentence I could never unhear. "You're just a burden." I didn't text. I didn't call. When I got home that night, I left my coat on the floor and sat on the edge of the couch, staring into nothing. My hands were still shaking. Not from anger, not really, from something colder, something closer to disbelief. I thought about every bill I'd paid, every Friday night I dropped off groceries, every time I'd left work early to drive my dad to a checkup, unclog their sink, or fix a flickering fuse box. I wasn't their daughter. I was their maintenance plan. So I made a decision. First, I turned off the auto pay, mortgage, utilities, all of it. Then I deleted every calendar reminder labeled Evans household. No message, no explanation, just absence. It took 3 days before the silence started to sting on their end. My dad called first. I didn't answer. His voicemail was clipped and gruff. "Claire, the mortgage didn't go through. Your mother's upset." "What's going on?" "No." "Are you okay?" "No, we're sorry. Just your mother's upset." Of course she was. The next morning I got a text from Mom. No greeting, no softening. Just, "We need you to sort the mortgage before it affects our credit. Don't be childish." Childish. The word hit like a slap, as if I'd thrown a tantrum, not walked away after a lifetime of being taken for granted. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering. I could have sent a dozen angry paragraphs. Could have emptied years of resentment into one long message. But instead, I left it on red and went back to making coffee. If I was just a burden to them, let's see how they function without the weight I carried. Weeks passed. No apology, no questions, no accountability, just silence. Not the kind that heals, but the kind that exposes. I'd always assumed deep down they'd notice if I stopped helping, that maybe my absence would reveal my worth. But they didn't miss me. They missed the convenience. They missed the free labor. They missed the money. That's when I realized they never actually saw me, just the things I did, the boxes I checked, the weight I carried, so they didn't have to. And when I stopped, they called it childish, not broken, not hurt, just difficult. And that's how I knew I wasn't coming back. It started with a call from Sophie, my cousin. She never gossiped, at least not to me. So when she phoned out of the blue on a rainy Thursday, I knew something was up. "Claire," she said, her voice hushed, "Brandon's in trouble." I leaned back in my chair. What kind of trouble? He quit his job? Or, well, rumor is he got pushed out. Something about mishandling client funds. Nothing official, but people are talking. I blinked. Brandon, Mr. Corner Office, the self-declared startup prodigy. I'd always wondered how he maintained the lifestyle, the watches, the cars, the trips to Santorini. Turns out maybe he couldn't. Sophie exhaled. He moved back in with your parents. Of course he did. By the end of that week, the messages started again. This time different in tone, sweeter practiced. Mom. Hey honey, I know things got tense. We all say things we don't mean. Can we talk? I made that cinnamon roast you used to love. Then Dad, mortgage is 2 months behind. Things are tough right now. Can you help out just this once? Just this once. Like the last 7 years didn't happen. Like I hadn't been quietly funneling money into their house while Brandon flew business class and drank scotch older than me. I didn't reply. Then Brandon called. I let it go to voicemail. Claire, hey, look. Things got messy, I know, but I've got this new business idea. Real potential. I just need some seed capital. I thought maybe you'd want to invest. Win-win, invest. He wasn't even sorry. He didn't apologize. He pitched like I was some angel investor he met on LinkedIn. Like he didn't laugh at me across the dinner table 6 weeks ago while I silently peeled potatoes in their kitchen. I played the message twice just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. But no, it was real word for word. That was the moment something clicked. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't a bad day or a heat-of-the-moment insult. This was who they were. And they still thought I was who I used to be. Quiet, giving, differential. They thought the silence meant I was hurting, that I'd eventually crawl back, as I always did once the guilt set in. But they were wrong. This silence wasn't weakness. It was clarity. I finally saw them. And more importantly, I saw me outside of their expectations, outside of their manipulation. And that version of me, she wasn't coming back. It was a Tuesday when the call came. I was at work going through quarterly reports, a half-drunk coffee by my keyboard. When my phone buzzed with an unknown number, I almost let it go. Almost. But something in my gut told me to pick up. Hello, a man's voice crisp and too polite. Hi, is this Claire Evans? Yes, this is Andrew Walters from North Pine Mortgage. We're calling to verify a recent loan application on 1713 Willow Bend Drive. I froze. That was my old family home, my parents' house. My voice tightened. I didn't submit any loan application. There was a pause. I heard papers shuffle. According to our records, the application was filed last week. You're listed as a co-signer along with a Brandon Evans. My stomach dropped. No, I didn't authorize that. I didn't sign anything. Brandon, that's my brother. Andrew cleared his throat. Would you like us to send you the documentation? Immediately, I hung up and just sat there, still quiet. Every part of me suddenly alert. 10 minutes later, the email came through. PDF attached. I opened it and felt something hot rise in my chest. There it was. My full name, my address, my income all scrolled across a mortgage refinancing document with my forged signature and Brandon's right beside it. The intended use section, startup capital. He tried to put my name on a 6F-figure loan using the house I once paid for without telling me. He even used my old bank details, the ones I hadn't touched in over a year, and he almost got away with it. I saw red. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and typed in the name Kimberly Ross, my old lawyer from a corporate lease dispute. She was sharp, ruthless, and allergic to. I forwarded everything, the PDF screenshots, voicemail clips. Then I added a single line. He forged my signature. I want this handled. She responded in under 15 minutes. First, freeze your credit. Second, file a police report for attempted fraud and identity theft. Third, I'm drafting a cease and desist. Fourth, how loud do you want this to be? That last line stuck with me. I'd spent my whole life being quiet, avoiding scenes, choosing peace over confrontation. But this crossed the line. This wasn't just manipulation. This was theft. This was betrayal of the most calculated kind. I called the bank, froze all my credit accounts, changed every password I had, then walked straight into the downtown police precinct and filed a report. It felt surreal. The kind of thing that happens to other people. The kind of thing that makes you question every memory, every decision, every time you thought maybe your family just didn't understand how much you gave. But now, it wasn't about hoping they'd see. It was about making sure they couldn't touch me again. That night, Brandon called. For once, I picked up. "Claire," he said, like we were best friends again. "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Save it." He paused. I know what you did. The bank called me. I have the documents. I've already filed the report and you'll be hearing from my lawyer." Silence. Then a laugh. Nervous. Insulting. "Dude, come on. It wasn't like that. I just needed a little help. You live alone. No kids, no major bills. I figured you'd be fine." "You already did it," I cut in. "You just didn't think you'd get caught." He exhaled hard. His tone shifted. "Let's be real for a second, Claire. You've always had help. You've always had it easy. You're just sitting there hoarding comfort while the rest of us are trying to build something." My throat tightened, not from hurt, but from clarity. He really believed it. He thought he was owed my life. He thought I was just extra expendable. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something sharper: focus, resolve. That night, I printed every receipt from the last 7 years, every transfer, every repair bill, every check I wrote to keep that house, their house, afloat. I organized them into a folder labeled burden. I thought it was fitting. The next morning, Kimberly called. "We're filing the cease and desist today. I'll also start prepping a civil complaint for fraud and damages. If they push back, we go nuclear." I nodded. "No more silence," I said, because silence was how they survived. But I wasn't surviving anymore. I was done. Now I was coming for everything they tried to steal. I didn't tell anyone I was moving, not Sophie, not the few coworkers who had tiptoed around my quiet mood since November, not even my landlord until I handed in my notice. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't revenge, it was relief. I transferred to our company's Boulder office, a branch I'd visited once during a training trip years ago. I remembered the mountains more than the people, how they rose behind the buildings like watchful gods. I needed that kind of stillness. The drive took 2 days. I packed everything I truly needed into the back of my car. A few suitcases, my laptop, a kettle, 2 framed photos I hadn't thrown away, not of my family but of myself on hiking trails. I once thought I was too busy to revisit. When I arrived in Colorado, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like I could finally breathe with my own lungs. The first week was strange. My new apartment was smaller, but it had sunlight. Actual sunlight. The kitchen window faced the mountains, and every morning the light slanted in like a quiet reminder. You're not there anymore. I bought plants. I signed up for a pottery class. Not because I wanted to be good at it, but because I wanted to feel clay in my hands instead of tension in my chest. I started seeing a therapist. Not for them, for me. At work, I spoke up in meetings. I volunteered for a cross-team project that brought me face to face with our regional director. For once, I wasn't the support system. I wasn't the ghost in the background who made everyone else look good. I was visible, and it terrified me. But it also felt like stepping into something I didn't realize I'd been missing ownership of my time, of my space, of my story. Back in Illinois, they were still unraveling. Sophie told me Brandon had moved back home, that the business idea had fallen apart, that my parents were barely keeping up with bills. They still hadn't apologized, not once. But oddly, I no longer needed it. Not the apology, not the explanation, not even closure, not in the way I thought I would. What I needed was peace, and distance gave me that. I started waking up without checking my phone first. I went days without thinking of them, weeks without the guilt tugging at my spine. I even joined a hiking group, a real one, with strangers, and trail maps, and thermoses full of bad coffee, and stories that didn't end in manipulation. One Saturday, standing at the edge of Bear Peak, whined in my face, and nothing but trees below, I whispered to myself, "You're not a burden. Not anymore. Not ever again." It was a subject line I almost missed. Evan's family mortgage urgent inquiry buried between a newsletter and a spam offer for discount vitamins. If I hadn't seen the sender and assistant manager at Midcount Savings Bank back in Illinois, I might have deleted it, but I clicked. The email was short, clinical. "We are reaching out regarding a delinquency on a mortgage account previously associated with your financial contributions. The property at 1713 Willow Bend Drive has been marked for pre-foreclosure. Please let us know if you intend to assist in bringing the loan current." I stared at the screen for a long time. That house, their house, the one I paid for in silence for years. The one I was told I didn't own, didn't deserve, wasn't connected to, and now they were losing it. I called the bank directly. The woman who answered was polite, slightly exhausted. She confirmed what I suspected. "The loan is 4 months behind. Late fees are piling up. If no payment is made, it will be listed for auction within 60 days. I thanked her. Then I called Kimberly. "I want it," I said. "I want the house under your name," she asked. "No," I said. "Under the LLC we set up for tax shielding. I want it clean." She smiled through the phone. I could hear it. "We'll stay quiet. Strategic surgical," and we were. I contacted a property investment group in Springfield who specialized in distressed real estate. Through them, we monitored the foreclosure process discreetly. I didn't need drama. I needed the deed. In the meantime, I dug up a document I'd almost forgotten, a notarized letter I had my parents sign years ago when I started helping with the mortgage. Back then, I framed it as protection in case anything went wrong. They signed it without reading. Typical. It stated, "Claire Evans has contributed over $92,000 toward mortgage payments, renovations, and property maintenance as an act of familial goodwill." Kimberly reviewed it and nodded. "If they try to contest your purchase or accuse you of theft, this buries them." 2 weeks later, Sophie called me. She sounded breathless. "Claire," she whispered, "you're not going to believe this. Brandon's back living with your parents. I didn't even flinch." "How bad is it?" "Bad," she said. "His startup's gone. Madison dumped him. He's borrowing money from friends. Mom was overheard at church saying she needed a miracle." I thanked her and hung up. This was the window. This was the moment they'd never see coming. I flew back the week before the auction. Quietly, no family, no drama. I stayed in a modest hotel just outside Maplewood, close enough to watch the edges of their world unravel without stepping in. On auction day, I didn't show up in person. I sent my agent, a sharp woman in a gray blazer who bid without emotion. When the auctioneer read Property 1713 Willow Bend Drive, 3-bed, 2-bath, the room barely stirred. Opening bid $240. My agent raised her paddle at $245.0. Another bidder countered at $250, but they dropped out at $260. Sold. The house was mine. Well, the LLC's, but legally, completely, unarguably mine. I didn't go to the house right away. We had the locks changed, deed transferred, title secured. 9 days later, we sent the official notice of ownership, along with a letter drafted by Kimberly and signed by me. This property is now under new ownership. All prior occupants must vacate within 14 days. No exceptions, no name, no apology, just clean legal distance. But fate is messy. The next day, I walked out of a bakery downtown and saw them, my parents and Brandon, standing outside a Wells Fargo branch, huddled, pale, tense. Brandon's jaw was clenched as he barked into his phone. My mother looked like someone had pulled the sky out from above her. They hadn't seen me, but then she did. Her eyes locked with mine across the street. She froze. Lips parted, something behind her eyes crumbled. I gave her the smallest nod, then turned and walked away. They were gone within 2 weeks. No goodbye, no confrontation, no forwarded address. The house was left silent, stripped of furniture, of voices, of everything except air that finally felt still. I walked through it one last time alone. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon. The living room echoed a little too easily, like it was glad to be emptied. In a back closet, I found a shoebox labeled with my name, filled with old report cards, a drawing of a stick figure family, and a thank you note I'd written my mom in 3rd grade after she packed my favorite lunch. She'd kept it. Or maybe just forgot it was there. I didn't take it with me. That little girl who wrote that note, she stayed in the box because the woman I'd become didn't need to be chosen. She chose herself. I didn't move back into the house. Instead, I partnered with a nonprofit that supports young women aging out of foster care. We turned the place into a transitional home, safe, stable, quiet. I funded the renovation through my business, set up a small grant in my grandfather's name, the only man in my family who ever saw me. 6 months later, I visited one evening. The porch light was on. Laughter drifted out the windows. Someone had painted the mailbox blue. I stood at the curb and smiled. Because that house, it no longer carried their legacy. It carried mine. And this time it was built on choice, healing, and fireproof peace.